In the financial world, there's an irrefutable maxim: don't fight the Federal. This means that when the Fed decides to cut interest rates and increase liquidity, you should buy assets. When it decides to raise rates and tighten, you should remain cautious. For decades, this has been virtually the simplest and most effective investment strategy on Wall Street. This strategy's effectiveness rests on a fundamental premise: that the Federal Reserve, an institution staffed by hundreds of top economics PhDs, can make rational decisions based on accurate and reliable economic data. But today, I want to ask you to consider a disturbing question. What if the core data the Fed relies on is itself inaccurate, or even demonstrably wrong? If the captain of the world's largest economy relies on a wrong chart, where will he lead us? This isn't alarmist talk. On August 1, 2025, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics released a seemingly unremarkable jobs report, showing 73,000 new jobs in July. But a subtle detail in the report ignited public opinion. The employment data for May and June had been revised downward by a full 258,000 jobs. This was equivalent to the employment of a small city disappearing overnight. Such a massive revision immediately triggered a political storm. The White House was extremely dissatisfied, believing that these poor data were affecting the implementation of its economic policies. There were even reports that President Trump had fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. This incident, like a flash of lightning, instantly illuminated the deep and dangerous fog behind U.S. economic data. It forced us to ask, how big are the flaws in the employment data that the Federal Reserve uses to decide whether to raise or cut interest rates and determine the flow of trillions of dollars in global capital? Is what we are seeing the truth or a carefully packaged illusion? To uncover this truth, we first need to meet Mike Shedlock, a highly respected data detective in the financial analysis field. Mike Shedlock, who uses the pen name Mish, for many years, he has been dedicated to uncovering the truth behind official economic data. His primary concern has never been the official unemployment rate trumpeted by the government and media. Every month, when we hear in the news that the U.S. unemployment rate has dropped to 4.2%, they're referring to a figure called the U3 rate. This figure is very narrowly defined, counting only those who are unemployed and actively seeking work in the past 4 weeks. But Mish believes that to see the full picture, we must focus on a more realistic and stark figure, the U6 rate. The U6 unemployment rate can be thought of as a natural picture without the beautification filter. It includes not only the unemployed in the U3 rate, but also two groups of people hidden by the official data. 1. The marginal additional labor force. These people want to work and are able to work, but due to frustration or other reasons, have given up looking for work in the past 4 weeks. They are directly excluded from the labor force by the U3 rate. 2. Part-time workers for economic reasons. These individuals have jobs but would like full-time employment, but due to the economic downturn, they can only find part-time work to make ends meet. In the U3 statistics, they are counted as employed. Thus, the U6 provides a broader and more realistic picture of the employment landscape. It reveals how many people are truly underemployed and struggling. This number is often much higher than the official U3, and it better reflects the true economic climate. Understanding the difference between the U3 and U6 figures only scratches the surface of the problem. The deeper issue lies in the monthly non-farm payroll report, which moves the nerves of global markets. In his research article, Mish bluntly calls it timely garbage. Why? Because the report's compilation process suffers from two fatal and increasingly festering flaws. Flaw 1, a firm life and death model that relies heavily on estimates. Times are changing rapidly, but the methods used to collect data have not been updated in a timely manner. The non-farm payroll data we hear about each month comes from a report called the Current Establishment Survey, CES. This report is based on data from a sample of approximately 629,000 workplaces. The problem is, this sample is incredibly small relative to the size of the U.S. economy. Worse still, its response rate is plummeting. By March 2025, the CES response rate had plummeted to a staggering 42.6%. This means that more than half of the businesses sampled simply didn't respond to the survey. One can imagine how likely it is that struggling, nearly bankrupt small businesses would have the time to complete the government survey. This results in a significant survivorship bias in the sample, which overrepresents the health of large, healthy businesses with dedicated personnel to handle the government questionnaire. To address this shortcoming, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics introduced a tool called the birth-death model. Simply put, this is a statistical model that guesses how many jobs are created each month due to the birth of new companies and how many are lost due to the death of existing ones. This model may work well when the economy is operating smoothly. However, at turning points, it often goes terribly wrong. When the economy begins to decline, the model's guesses consistently overestimate the creativity of new companies and underestimate the rate at which existing ones fail. Mish bluntly points out that this model has been proven wrong and is nonsense that distorts employment data. Models can only assist human cognition, not constitute it. At critical moments, model data can seriously mislead real-world decision-making. Flaw 2. Shocking deviation from actual census data. So, how do we know this monthly report is distorted? Because the United States has a more accurate and authoritative source of employment data, the Quarterly Census of Employment and Wages, QCEW. The QCEW is not a sample survey, but rather akin to a census. It compiles actual unemployment insurance records from over 12.2 million businesses, covering over 95% of all U.S. jobs. You could consider it the gold standard of employment data. Its only drawback is its significant release delay, typically 5 to 6 months. When Mish compared the timely CES report with the delayed but accurate QCEW data, a startling truth emerged. Mish's research shows that starting in the second half of 2024, a widening gap will emerge between the robust job growth depicted by the CES report and the flat or even stagnant employment picture reflected by the QCEW. By the end of 2024, the cumulative difference between the two figures will have reached a staggering 3.6 million jobs. What does this mean? It means that over the past year, the U.S. economy's actual job growth may have been 3.6 million fewer than the figures we hear in the news each month. This figure is enough to alter our understanding of the entire economic cycle. This explains why we're seeing such a large-scale, after-the-fact revision. Those hundreds of thousands of jobs that were revised down weren't statistical errors, but rather the timely but potentially rubbish CES report. Months later, the QCEW report finally had to succumb to the harsh reality revealed by the CES report. This is very similar to the dilemma investors face when using technical analysis indicators for trading. Indicators with high timeliness are often prone to false signals, while reliable signals have a significant lag, making them essentially useless. Now, let's return to the original question. When Federal Reserve policymakers sat in the conference room that determines the direction of global interest rates, they had on their desks the timely but inflated CES employment report, which was likely significantly overestimated. Meanwhile, the more accurate QCEW report, due to its lag, remained in the Census Bureau's database. This created a disastrous situation. The Fed may be basing its current monetary policy on an outdated and overly optimistic economic illusion. In other words, the Fed's decisions were made by a group of people in a room, and their success or failure depended entirely on their professional skills and conscience. As a reader named Cyrano commented on Mish's article, this raises an even more chilling question. Will a team of hundreds of PhDs really accept these data at face value? Or are these brilliant economists, acutely aware of the true state of the job market, willing to hide behind these fabricated numbers to paint a rosy picture for the public? Whether the answer is the former or the latter, the consequences are worrying. It means the Fed's actions will inevitably lag behind the true economic cycle. They may maintain excessively high interest rates even after the economy has already entered a recession, driven by seemingly strong employment data. And when, months later, the massive data revisions are finally released and the true picture becomes clear, they may be forced to hastily pull the trigger on rate cuts. But by then, it may be too late. So, beyond the macro employment totals, are there other signals hidden in the details of the data that foreshadow the impending storm? What is the true plight of those overlooked by the official unemployment rate? This is the truth we will continue to explore in the next episode.